Yo, it's another Wednesday, so I'm heading out for the Savage Worlds game once again. I will be making several different smaller videos that I'm going to compile into a single large video at the end of this. Basically, I'm going to try and update you guys on what's going on in the story since I played most recently, which means that there's probably going to be a little bit after a break when we first play. There might be a little bit right afterwards, and that'll pretty much make up the video this time, and it's probably going to be while I'm driving here in the car. Later in the evening, it might be a little bit on the darker side, which is just fine. And just letting you know what's up before it all starts. Also, there were a few things that I forgot to mention that happened last week, but they weren't part of the main storyline. So I'm going to go ahead and fill you in on that. So right before we ended, we had started on our next mission, which is we're trying to infiltrate the building that we knew had powered the super laser that almost blew us all to hell. And so what we did was we located the building where the laser beam was being fired from by like hacking their radio networks and other stuff like that. And so my character went through and did a little bit of reconnaissance by using his altered metal form to seep into the pipes and go through the sewer systems. Kind of got a little bit lost here and there, but he found his way into the main piping area, and from there went through and he found a guy that had been killed. He was an Atlantean, and he was probably part of a cult according to the various never mind that, I was getting a phone call from someone that I'm going to pick up in a little bit. He was getting some stuff going on that he figured out that the guy was part of a cult, and he had probably been killed in some kind of crazy ritual or some other bullshit like that. He did have a weapon there that I considered stealing, but there was no way I was going to fit it into the pipes. I took a bunch of Atlantean writing and basically copied it and pasted it into my database using interface, like just downloading stuff. And meanwhile, Blindside went through and he investigated the place while invisible, and then just for the fun of it, to see like the response time that they had, he lit a stick of dynamite into a portion of the wall and blew it open and then ran like hell. And we all escaped so far, and now we're going to see what's going to happen this week. So that'll come up soon. So I didn't really get much of a chance to update in the middle of the game because there wasn't really a straight up break. You can probably barely see me because it's nighttime and I'm driving. And so, what happened? We scoped out the other place that we were thinking about taking out, but we decided to hold back on that for a little bit because even if the giant space laser is attacking people at random, we really wanted to have a bit more on the side of resources before we decided to make our approach and attack. So we decided, thanks to having a little bit of a, since we had a little bit of a tip as to where we could possibly find some treasure, so to speak. Namely, we had a hint that there was a group in Chicago that had been run by the Capones, which was indeed based somewhat on the actual real Al Capone and stuff. We decided that we would try and find whatever was being guarded at this place instead, so that we could have a little bit of loot, so that we'll have more money to spend on our venture of going after the main laser controlling tower. So we assembled ourselves. My character went through and acted as vehicle so that we could go from Star City all the way to Chicago. And while we were on a road trip, different characters, we had like a small interlude where our characters told little stories about their past. Mr. Smith told us about the fact that his character is so old he was in the Great War, and he told us about how a German soldier had ended up in the trenches where they were, and he kind of like surrendered and had been friendly with them and taught them how to make sauerkraut. My character talked about how he was developed as an AI at first before he actually was given a robotic body, and how he was used to basically simulate different types of strategy games like chess and checkers, and then worked all the way up to being like that world's version of AlphaGo, so to speak. And then afterwards he kind of expressed that he longed to find other beings like himself that were synthetic robots, stuff like that. So he was kind of telling a little bit how, you know, he's kind of lonely in the world of humans. Another character told us about how being on a road trip reminded his character of going to an amusement park with his father, and his father having booze in his coffee cup, and apparently the kids drank it by accident, and one of them threw up on one of the roller coaster rides. Another one of us told a story of how he was touring in Asia, and he basically told us a terrible joke about how a monk told him that man who enters door sideways, Bangkok. Yeah, real wonderfully mature, of course. And Machiavelli told us about how his character grew up in like the streets, and how he was actually given superpowers by Dr. Destruction himself, and that the reason that he worked for him was because he helped bring him from a place of not being able to do much of anything, and then actually being able to have power over the world around him. And our commander, the commander of Scorpion, told us about how they had been planning a massive heist. They were going to steal George Washington's head off of Mount Rushmore, and as they like got all the cranes and stuff and started removing it, they discovered that underneath George Washington was actually a statue of Richard Nixon, and they found that stuff and they kept it in files to blackmail the United States for their deepest and darkest secret. So after we had this little interlude of sorts where our characters got to know each other a little bit better, which I thought was really cool, we approached the area around a bunker. The thing is that like Chicago had been kind of like totally blown the hell up mostly and turned into a shithole of a war zone. There was like a no man's land that went really far and wide between like the outer reaches, where there were like different radio towers and all kinds of scouts going out and about. It took us a little bit of time, but between Mr. Smith and Blindside, they went through, because Blindside has his invisibility power, so he could like basically, you know, sneak around and kind of figure out what was going on. And Mr. Smith turned himself into like a little tiny bird and scouted stuff out for us too. And they basically figured out that we could approach, and they figured out the different patterns. We could have just avoided everything entirely, but we decided to approach a radio tower because we noticed that the entire time that they were doing scouting, they saw that every now and then, like the super laser was firing at different spots in the no man's land, so to speak. And it was just kind of like sweeping around, slow and easy, going around. It didn't really look like it was trying to attack anything directly, and it wasn't going straight for the bunker itself. And part of that was we didn't know why that was. So that's why we went in and we invaded one of the radio control towers. And as I was trying to make my way up the stairs, I completely botched a stealth roll entirely badly, which basically made my character go up some stairs and find a pipe, and he tried to slip into the pipe and the whole pipe falls down. The guards noticed us. One of the guys gets picked off by blindside across the street through a window, because the buildings are like right next to each other, and he just shoots one guy through the window. Everybody else is rushing towards the tower as quickly as they can. A commander does something in the building and jumps out the window to escape, or he tries to escape anyways. We'll get back to that. Meanwhile, the guys inside the tower are freaking out. Guys are shooting down at me. My character, after getting shot at and he isn't hurt because I was pretty fortunate to barely get grazed at all, I make my way up to fight against them, and one of the guys of the two that attacked me from the second floor was killed entirely by blindside. The other guy gets attacked by Mr. Smith, who's transformed himself into a troll of all things. But he doesn't actually get any, he doesn't manage to hurt him as the troll at all. My character, however, successfully grapples the guy to hold him in place with one arm, takes his other arm, and whipping out his laser sword, just impales the guy from behind. Absolutely no mercy, no chance of survival. The guy is killed terribly, and that's when we learn what the commander had been doing upstairs. He set off some charges that blew up the top floor of the building. It came down crashing on all of us. Momentarily did manage to shake my character, but as soon as he recovered from that, we all ran towards the guy. Machiavelli pumped him for some information, and we found out basically that he didn't know what was going on with the lasers. He was just following orders. The relay station was acting as nothing more than a relay station. From that point, we decided that we were going to go ahead and try and find out who was at the bunker and do a little bit of parlay with them. You know, we wanted to basically offer them, hey, you know what? We'll help you get the hell out of here. But, you know, we want whatever that treasure is that's hidden in this place. We want that stuff. We want some of the good stuff you got in there, because we don't know what it is, but we want it because we know it's good, was the basic logic that dictated our actions. So, Mr. Smith decides to approach as like a cockroach, so to speak, and I go walking with blindside, because I can trail after him as like a liquid metal pool and be very inconspicuous, and he can outright turn himself invisible, so I can kind of like hide behind him and be like a mirage, just kind of glowing along the surface of the ground as we make our way over. And we get to the place. Mr. Smith goes underneath the desk of one of the mob boss guys, and he's like, I wish to parlay with you. Don't worry, I come in peace, and all this other stuff. The guy, of course, freaks out because it's the voice coming from a cockroach underneath a desk. He has no idea who's there. Eventually, Mr. Smith is like, hey, now don't worry, we're not going to hurt you. We just want to figure out what's going on. What treasure you guys have here, we want a part of it. We'll help you out. He's convinced of it, so he basically says, you know, it's in there, but it's like in this vault, and it's really well locked up. Do you guys have anyone that can handle computers? Well, my character is not technically very smart, but he's a robot, and he can interface with high technology stuff. And since most of it is by technology, I volunteer. I'm like, yeah, I can get us in there. So I follow him down this passage. It goes into an underground tunnel, and it goes deep, man. I mean, really freaking deep, like a quarter mile into the earth, after like checkpoint after checkpoint, where there's like spots where like guys could possibly just kill you with flamethrowers for showing up. But anyways, we finally make it to the console of the computer thing, and we find out that, well, I find out at least by investigating the thing, that it has 3 levels of security that are technological, and there's some other level of security, but I can't get a handle on that. So I decide to handle the technological stuff. I end up trying and trying and trying over and over again to try and break into it. And what I end up doing is I end up having to brute force through the technology to disable each of the security measures one by one. And the security measures were as follows. It required a voice, it required a fingerprint, and it required a retinal scan. And I rolled, I want to say, anywhere between like 10 or 12 times in total to get the full, like, I think it was 3 or 4 successes I needed to actually disable all of the locks. I disabled all the electronic stuff, and I'm like, hey, look, I've disabled the electronics. I'm not sure what else I can do at this point, but I know that there's some really mysterious looking text over here on the way in, and I have some other friends who might be able to help us. So we get Mr. Smith in. He looks at it. He doesn't really know what it is. I take the runes because I can like translate it into geometry and other stuff, and we have a linguist that we can radio. So I radio him like the geometry to explain to him what the symbols look like and everything, and he ends up basically drawing it out. He figures out it's Atlantean. After a bit, I talk a bit with the party. I figure out, hey, you know what we should look at? We should see if the keys are unique, and we find out that yes, all the keys, because the mob bosses have had all these different keys to get into the vault in the first place from the outside, and apparently each of the keys is an individual key. They don't have similar markings. They're all unique. So we look at all the unique keys, and we discover that they correspond to Atlantean writing along the runes that are around the door. And then we go through, and after figuring out where the keys went and which order they were along the door, Mr. Smith had to do some translation stuff with Machiavelli, and they figured out what the Atlantean mumbo jumbo was they needed to repeat, and it successfully opened the door, revealing to us a crap ton of gold, weapons, a mysterious sarcophagus filled with who the hell knows what, and a bunch of papers that the capos had gone through and collected over the years. And that was where we pretty much ended for the night. I'm very much looking forward to what happens next week, and I'll update you guys on it then.